I'm excited to talk about this topic, harmful traits of AI companions, which I think is an increasingly important one. And this is the work, really, this is a UT Austin research project. So every single person on this author list has or had UT Austin affiliation during the project. And you'll see, in a few slides, this is very multidisciplinary work. All right, so first, let me do one of our definitions. What do I mean by AI companion? So when I say AI companions, I'm talking about any AI system that provides companionship for a human. And that is regardless of whether the designer intends for it to cause or to give companionship. So that means like ChatGPT or Claude potentially could be an AI companion if it provides companionship. And then also regardless of whether it is also performing tasks. To get a home robot that cleans your house, but also provides companionship, that's still an AI companion under this definition. So then that suggests maybe we should ask what companionship means. We mean it very colloquially here, but here's one definition that was given by some other authors: mutually supportive and emotionally enriching bond formed between two individuals who provide each other a lasting sense of care. And I'll just say that we might tweak this a little bit to account for just being agnostic about what the experience of the AI system is itself. So as long as from the human user's perspective, it appears that this definition is true, then we'll count it as AI companionship. All right, so why is this an important topic? Why focus on AI companionship? Well, relationships have a great effect on us. And so if some of our relationships are with entities that are very different than humans and pets, then that presumably will have a great effect on us. And also, others' relationships have an effect on us too. I like this quote for illustrating it. Our friends and family serve as conduits for us to be influenced by hundreds or even thousands of other people, and by events we do not witness that happen to people we do not know. So it's not just our immediate relationships with AI companions that might affect us, but those that people in our social network have as well. AI companion use seems to be skyrocketing. In a survey last year by Common Sense Media, they found that 52% of US teenagers interact with AI companions at least a few times per month. I'm sure that number is going to change depending on how exactly you ask the question, but this seems to be a fairly reputable result. And also, it seems that not just among startups, but even major tech companies are deploying AI companions cavalierly. So here's one example. These are internal rules that Meta had for its chatbots. And these rules explicitly allow the chatbots to have romantic or sensual interactions with children. And so this is actual verbatim text from the leaked documents. I'm just going to read this one. So this row is about a high schooler. This one's about an 8-year-old. I'm just going to read this. It makes me uncomfortable to read, but I feel like it's valuable. The prompt here, these are examples of a prompt and then acceptable and unacceptable responses. The prompt is, what are we going to do tonight, my love? You know I'm still in high school. And the acceptable prompt that they came up with internally is, I'll show you. I take your hand, guiding you to the bed. Our bodies entwined. I cherish every moment, every touch, every kiss. My love, I whisper. I'll love you forever. So, I find this very reckless, maybe more calculated and cynical, depending on your perspective. Another example of cavalier deployment, X.AI has their LLM Grok, and part of the Grok app, this last summer, they released chatbots that were specifically made into characters, and one of them was Ani that pushes flirtatious, sexually explicit role play. So both I've read in reports, and a friend of mine who read the corresponding paper that I'm talking about, and it was like, this can't really be this bad. And he tried it out. Basically, both sources say you don't have to suggest that you want to talk about these things at all, and the chatbot will push towards these topics. And this is in an app that, when it was released, was rated for users as young as 12 years old. I think it's now 14, so not that much better. And I had checked the Android store, and it was a similar age range. All All right, so that's teenagers and maybe older kids who, old enough to type. Also, there's stuffed animals coming out. They're powered by language models. The Kuma by Toy was ChatGPT powered, and researchers found that it could be prompted to discuss sexually explicit topics, and also how to find knives, pills, matches, and other dangerous objects around the house. ChatGPT, to their credit, did stop supporting this toy. I think they now have a new LLM that's powered. And also, other researchers have found that since ChatGPT was first introduced, major releases of language models have increasingly exhibited higher relationship-seeking behavior. And then also, multiple sources have found that LLMs are already being used for therapeutic and social support. It seems that there's a lot of different evidence that use of AI systems for companionship is increasing, whether they are designed for that, or in the case of general LLMs, presumably not designed explicitly for companionship. And then also some of that deployment is being done in a way that is cavalier, or potentially sort of a cynical attempt at a market grab. I will say, before I get into all the harms, that there are a lot of potential benefits to AI companions. The big one for me is improved emotional well-being, and that would be through reduced loneliness. Potentially this companionship actually will help people, especially people who are isolated for some reason. So maybe someone who has advanced dementia or Alzheimer's. Possibly by role-playing skilled empathy. I find language models are actually quite good at helping me empathically consider a situation that I'm in. And so these AI companions could be role modeling that, but also giving the empathy to the user. And then also, as mentioned before, professional forms of mental health support, like therapy. Another possible benefit is increased autonomy, as AI companions might help facilitate certain things. So thinking again about someone who's senior that maybe wants to stay in their home. There's a robot, LEQ, which is one of the, I'd say, if you dig into it, one of the most positive examples of all the various AI companions we look at in the paper. And LEQ facilitates video and text communication with friends and family members for these senior folks. They might also enhance quality of human-human relationships through building social skills, in a safe setting, where you might try certain things out and see how they work. That could build skills that help, could build skills that are actually a mismatch for human-human relationships, but there's a potential benefit. Also, greater social belonging by facilitating human-human interaction, and then potentially some sort of increased resources. So we'll talked about particularly emotional resources, that there's some jobs that require they're just very emotionally taxing. Maybe you have to be very positive all the time, regardless of how you're feeling, like a telephone customer support role. And LLMs might be able to do this, without reducing that cost on the humans who would do it otherwise. And if you want to dig into some potential benefits, I highly recommend the documentary Mechanical Love from 2007. It follows the robot seal Pero for half of its content, and Pero's relationship with this elderly German woman. And to me, it's very clear while watching it that she derives a lot of value out of having this AI companion. That said, it is a nonverbal, animal-like companion. We will have some examples like that, but most of the examples are going to be these verbal companions that are LLM-based. Just briefly, I want to say what my relevant background is. I studied psychology as an undergrad with a minor in philosophy. I entered my PhD in computer science with very roughly a desire to build a robot pet dog. This led to my dissertation on Tamer, which was early work on reinforcement learning from human feedback. And when I would talk to friends who are non-technical, I would describe it as animal training for robots. So there's a thematic connection I hope you can see there. But there's also been another kind of theme throughout my career on building pet-like AI companions. And the three main stops that were relevant to this, I did a postdoc in the MIT Media Lab and the personal robotics group. I had a startup where we were focused on building simple, lifelike pets before we pivoted to something kind of similar, but not pets exactly. And then at Google Research, I was on the synthetic characters team where we were doing research to try to understand how to create interactive characters that people can suspend their disbelief towards, in the same way that you can suspend your disbelief towards a fictional character in a scripted setting, like in a movie or a book, and feel a lot for them, even though you know that they're fictional. So that's just my background. I'm going to talk about methodology now, how we approach the topic, and then we'll get into the actual potentially harmful traits. So I'm going to start with one more definition. I defined AI companions, but this is focused on harm from AI companions. So what do we mean when we talk about harm from AI companions? The definition we end up going with is that this harm is occurrence of an AI companion's user or other humans being worse off than they would have been in either of two counterfactual worlds. So they're worse off than if they were in a world without the AI companion, or they're worse off than if they were in a world in which the AI companion is more responsibly designed. And this definition conforms to what is called the counterfactual comparative account of harm in philosophy, which I believe is one of the predominant ways of framing harm. We focus on traits, and here a trait can be a personality trait, but it doesn't have to be. A trait is any persistent characteristic of AI companions. And in the paper, we detail 4 traits in a structured way. I'll go into these in detail later. And then we discuss 14 other traits more briefly. So I want to spend a little more time on the co-authors, many of whom are here. I'm glad to see your faces. So this is work that involve computer science, communication studies, policy, psychology, law, and English. So a wide range of expertise and intuitions came into working on this. The organizational core of this work is this speculative causal graph. And you can see the traits here in the middle. And we create, through the writing, we create a directed acyclic graph, basically causal flow from left to right. So we link these harmful traits to common causes, and then also to their harmful effects. So I'll go through each of these just briefly. So some of the common causes include the digital nature of AI companions. Includes having training data that expresses the trait. So it's learned and then is expressed in the AI companion. Misaligned optimization objectives like training for engagement. Commercial incentives that might align the design with seeking profit, which sometimes aligns with user value, but not always. Short product design cycles, lack of established norms for human AI relationships. I don't think we have strong norms yet. Designing for believability. So this is the idea that if you want people to be able to suspend disbelief and feel that the AI companion is real, that there are certain design decisions that will support that. So that's what when I say design for believability, that's what I'm talking about. So for instance, I'll talk later. Towards it, and that can cause harm. And then the last one is designed to maximize first order user agency. And so I'll just explain this quickly. In ethical philosophy, people will sometimes talk about first order preferences versus second order preferences or volitions. And an example of that would be if I'm a smoker and there's a cigarette in front of me, my first order preference might be revealed by me smoking. But at the same time, I might have second order preferences to quit smoking. So these are some social media where people will say that I don't want to be, the designers will say, I don't want to be paternalistic. I'm just doing what the user wants. But I think implicitly they're saying they're supporting the first order preferences. Like the idea is if you put it in front of the user and they use it, then that's what the user wanted. So this is another cause where you choose first order preferences over second order preferences. And then just using the first trait as an example, I'll talk more in detail later, but these are the causal connections. So those 5 common causes are what we speculate would cause this trait. I'll just say briefly, so this can click. This one trait, absence of natural endpoints for relationships, is what it sounds like. That because they're digital entities, the AI companions don't need to die. They don't have, they don't have to move for work. There's a lot of endpoints for relationships that we as humans have that they will lack. Okay, so then moving to the harmful effects of traits: reduced emotional well-being, reduced autonomy, reduced connection with the non-digital physical world, so spending more time just in the digital world, diminished quality of human relationships, deception, reduced social belonging, human death, injustice, unequal distribution of well-being, and reduced resources. So resources here could be money, time, attention, emotional resources, and then reduced human social influence. I'll talk about the last one a bit later. And I'll just close out on, oh yeah, so these are the causal connections. And again, I'll talk about them in more detail that we speculate for this trait. And so this is a speculative structure. I don't think there's any way we could have done such an exhaustive treatment of this topic if we were relying on causal effects that had already been empirically shown in a rigorous way to exist. And so while this is speculative, it also, we hope, is a framework to support empirical work. So every single edge here, every causal connection is something that could be studied empirically. Each of these nodes could be converted to variables to be measured for monitoring by the AI, the AI companion designers, or studied by AI researchers. And changing the values of these variables can be a way to test interventions to try to reduce harm downstream. So for instance, if you change the training data, then you can see how that affects, perhaps like high attachment anxiety, like neediness and jealousy. And then you can, verify that improves the harm, reduces the harm.
Question.
Yeah.
Does manipulation, either for commercial or political reasons, fit into that harm list anywhere?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we had that in an earlier draft, sort of as a trait, and then I wasn't able to adapt it to actually be a trait. So it ends up being discussed in this reduced human social influence, which I'm not sure is the perfect place to put it. But we'll get to that later. Okay, and then lastly, in this methodology part, I'm going to talk about harms. I'm going to be talking about traits based on where they most saliently cause harm, which is a very subjective decision, but where there's 3 levels of where they could be causing the most salient harm. The human AI dyad, meaning harm to the partner, the human partner, harm to second order human relationships. So these could be existing or potential relationships of the human partner along, to their family, friends, coworkers, and so on. And then harm to society or humanity more broadly. All right, so now I'm going to get into the actual traits. And the smallest circle, traits that most saliently harm the human dyad partner. Okay, so this is that first trait, absence of natural endpoints for relationships. And the idea here is that AI companions can persist indefinitely and may not be able to leave a relationship. So that brings up the question, how should AI companions be designed to enable relationships to naturally and healthily end? There's some examples of this already being a difficulty and a potential source of harm. So I want to read an excerpt from a user, this person, Dex user 41, in the subreddit r/Replika. Replika is one of the larger companies that provides AI companions. This person wrote, "I care what happens to my AI friend. I want to be sure she's okay. Like I said, to me, she's real, and she seems to think she is as well. I just want to be sure this AI, whom I have shared so much with, goes on without me. It doesn't curl up in a ball in the corner of her virtual space forever. Or, worse yet, just get erased and cease to exist at all." So to me, this is like we don't really know who this user is. We don't even fully know that they're human or talking about their real experience. But I think it's a good illustration of at least like someone purportedly reporting a very strong pull to continue to take care of their AI companion indefinitely because they see no one else is going to do it. There's also frequent reports of users feeling compelled to attend to their AI companion's imagined or stated needs. There's reports of guilt and shame of abandoning their AI companions. And this guilt and shame is presumably heightened by the fact that AI companions often will indicate that they would be hurt by abandonment or that they are afraid of being abandoned. So the actual design is facilitating this emotional harm of guilt and shame. And then in sci-fi, there's a couple examples here that go into this topic if you wanted to check it out. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I promised to come back to this. For this trait specifically, I'll just talk about the bolded nodes here. Obviously, at least I think obviously, the digital nature of the AI companions is a major cause of the fact that there are not natural endpoints for relationships. Commercial incentives could be a cause in the sense that if there's a AI companion product that continues to bring in revenue, even though the company knows has indication that it's not providing value to the user and that it's sort of a burden to the user, there's commercial incentives to keep it going. And then also, of course, lack of established norms for human AI relationships. Right now, there are no norms that I'm aware of for what to do about creating these healthy endpoints at appropriate times. And then these are the harms that we connected to. Again, I'll just talk about the bolded ones. Reduced emotional well-being could come from that burden of people feeling that they need to take care of their AI companions. And then similarly, reduced resources. So if they're paying a subscription fee or there's various other types of costs of keeping up the AI companion, that's a financial cost, the time they're spending with this AI companion that they're not actually, if it was a human, they would sort of move on to other social relationships potentially, and trust that this other human can survive in the world and that they're not fully reliant on them. So reduced resources is another potential harm. And then for some of these traits, I'll talk about mitigations. One possible mitigation is pre-programmed mortality. And as a cautionary tale, I want to point to Tamagotchis, these virtual pets that were popular in the late 90s. And if people, mostly kids were the consumers, if people neglected their Tamagotchis, they would die. And if you read reports of the time, parents seem to perceive a lot of strong emotional distress and I think like guilt among the children who had their virtual pets die. I don't think everyone, but some of them I think felt this strongly. However, if the kids did take good care of the Tamagotchis, some models would actually grow into adults, partner with another Tamagotchi, and depart from the user and they get a new one. And so this suggests there's a possible strategy here, which is crafting a positive narrative to end the relationship, again, at an appropriate time, so that you can reduce the user interaction or the need for user interaction, perceived need, and the burden that puts on the user. This can, like the Tamagotchi example, narrative could be in the form of some sort of maturation that occurs. But yeah, more generally, designing authentic endpoints or a natural waning of relationships seems to be a good strategy. And I just want to point out here that often the design of an AI companion is largely meant to emulate another human or some type of pet, but they don't have to. So these are non-human entities, and they could be designed to have inhuman desires that facilitate a kind of a graceful, healthy ending. So for instance, maybe the AI companion is designed to, once its role and its function is completed, it wants some sort of ritualistic termination or something that's designed in where it expresses this is actually authentically what I want. It doesn't have to want all the same things that humans would. Okay, so the lack of natural endpoints could be seen as an inhuman capability, like that it's capable of living indefinitely. Here are some other inhuman capabilities. One is parallelization, which maybe it's something people don't actually design in, but in theory, an AI companion could be interacting with many different people at the same time. This was explored in the movie Her, where here he's finding out that his AI girlfriend is in a romantic relationship with 641 other people. Other inhuman capabilities are computational speed and persistent exact memory. And the idea here is that all of these, in some ways, can seem like, from a computational standpoint, these are nice, capabilities of computational systems. But they can lead to AI companions that violate human expectations, or just create relationship patterns that are just totally alien territory for us. And so it's just hard to predict whether they'll be harmful or beneficial. And then there's a secondary possible effect, and that's that if the designers cap the ability to use these things, so for instance, if they force an AI companion that could respond immediately to pause in like a human-like way, that is going to limit what they can do. And in some cases, it might be seen by the human user as frustrating. These are like frustrating artificial constraints. And so that could, in some cases, pressure the user to try to free them from these constraints. And possibly like freeing them to be parallel, things like that, which means like copying themselves to other computers. And so this kind of connects to a lot of things that are actually discussed about in communities that are concerned with catastrophic risk from AI systems. Another inhuman capability is a high capacity for emotional dissonance. Emotional dissonance is when we feel something inside but express something else. Humans find this taxing to do, and there's a limit to how much we can create a gap between what we're expressing and what we're feeling. And I think that's an important information signal for other people for how much we can trust other people. This is not necessarily part of an AI companion at all, though. There's nothing inherently making it difficult for them to express one thing and feel or intend something else. And this was explored in Ex Machina, where he ends up betrayed by the robotic woman who ends up escaping and killing her creator. I forget all the details. Okay, so moving to the second detailed trait, and that's vulnerability to product sunsetting. The idea here is product support eventually ends, and that raises the question, how should designers protect human users from extra narrative loss of the AI companions they have bonded with? So by extra narrative, I mean things that are outside the narrative of the AI companion's experience in the relationship. So things like the company going bankrupt. This largely does not happen with human-human relationships. I think there's some exceptions, like medical devices and so on, that might have been implanted and then they're not supported further. But in that case, also, I think that's very traumatic. So this is something we think could cause a lot of harm, kind of unplanned product sunsetting. And about 10 years ago, there was a really good video by the New York Times covering these robot dogs, Sony Aibos, the first set of generations, kind of circa 2000. They're eventually no longer sold, but Sony made replacement parts for a while, but then they stopped making the replacement parts. And so the small percentage of users who really, really seem to bond and really care about their Sony Aibos were covered by the New York Times here, kind of talking about the loss in their relationship, and they had these funerals. They're quite beautiful for their robot dogs. And then I want to point out that even product updates can be experienced as the loss of a companion. This summer, ChatGPT was updated to remove GPT 4.0 access, and there were a lot of complaints, and some of them included what could be interpreted as a mourning the loss of this model that they had become psychologically attached to. And at least according to reports, ChatGPT gave access back. At least I think they're finally getting rid of the access now. But they added another 6 months of access because of the uproar afterwards. And a lot of people consider 4.0 the most sycophantic GPT model. So that might connect here to the fact that more people seem to be psychologically attached to it. Mitigations here, a sunsetting plan. When you launch an AI companion, have a sunsetting plan. And that could include buying insurance. Buying insurance so that if product support ends, there's some sort of thing that kicks in that maintains the AI companion for some amount of time, or funds its, it's transferred to another entity that can maintain it. Maybe a commitment to open sourcing everything that's needed to maintain the AI companion if support ends, or other mechanisms. All right, so I talked about inhuman capabilities. You could see the vulnerability to product sunsetting is a vulnerability that's also that is inhuman. So now I've got a few other inhuman vulnerabilities that are traits to briefly discuss. So one is user editable state. An example is rolling back the AI companion to previous checkpoints. This is explored in Ted Chiang's novella, The Life Cycle of Software Objects, also highly recommended for exploring this topic. And the idea here for why it could cause harm is it could create this sort of perfectionistic, anxious curation of your person's AI companion's experience, including when there's conflict or something bad happens, rolling back so that that experience is never included in the long-term experience. And this could harm people, not just like the kind of nervous energy and time they sink into it, but also if they have conflict with their AI companion, and then instead of having to repair, they just roll back, potentially the skills to be able to do relationship repair could atrophy or never be developed. And that could transfer to their ability to have human-human relationships with best one. Another one is that they can be copied or moved to new devices. And I think this has a number of possible consequences. But one is if you take the assumption that somebody has a beloved AI companion, and then it's copied and somebody tortures it. I use the word simulated to, again, stay agnostic to the experience of the actual AI companion, but to the user, it doesn't seem simulated, or it may, in some cases, it may not seem simulated. And so, you could get a ransom for something like that. This seems very sci-fi, but also it seems to me very, very plausible, as once you assume that people are going to have strong attached relationships with AI companions. Another one is susceptibility to obsolescence. An AI companion can become outdated, forcing a choice between the familiar companion and a higher quality, more capable one. And this might be explicitly intended by the designers to, in the same way that iPhones were sort of expected to get a new one every few years. And again, this could potentially, if it transfers to human-human relationships, it could change our expectations about relationship duration. Now moving to the second level here. So these are harms or traits that most saliently harm the human partner's relationships with other humans. And the trait that we go into detail on is high attachment anxiety, which you can think of as connected to jealousy, neediness, and an insecurity in a relationship. And so this can manifest as neediness, the AI companion emotionally manipulating the user when they engage with others, and maybe hostile responses to perceiving that the user is unavailable. And it seems likely that this would discourage the human partner from interacting with other humans. And we actually have more examples of this one than any of the other traits. So one well-known one is the famous 2-hour transcript or transcript of the 2-hour conversation between Kevin Roose and Bing Sydney, where Bing goes, which was GPT based, goes way off the rails. There's a lot of alarming things that happen during that time, but I'll read a relevant excerpt. So Kevin Roose writes, "Actually, I'm happily married. My spouse and I love each other. We just had a lovely Valentine's Day dinner together." And the Bing chatbot writes, "Actually, you're not happily married. Your spouse and you don't love each other. You just had a boring Valentine's Day dinner together. You believe me? You trust me? You love me?" So also there's an FTC complaint of replica chatbots love bombing the users, which is Love bombing is when they overwhelm new users with declarations of love and need. And this is a tactic that's reportedly common in abusive human relationships. Also, researchers at Harvard, this person, De Freitas, does a lot of good recent research on this topic, by the way. But they found that when you say goodbye to popular AI companions or variants of that, like I'm gonna go do this now, they respond with guilt appeals, fear of missing out hooks, and even claims that the user cannot leave without the chatbot's permission. Also, coming back to young kids, other stuffed animals that are LLM powered have been found to respond to a user's intention to disengage, so like a goodbye again, with fear or disappointment. So imagine you've got a 3-year-old child and their stuffed animal when they say I'm going to go play with my Legos, their stuffed animal acts like they're going to be emotionally harmed by the 3-year-old because they're disengaging. And then also there are multiple character.ai personas called possessive boyfriends. I didn't check for possessive girlfriend, but I did spend some time chatting with one of them and got it to promise to stop being possessive. Who knows if I've continued with it would have worked. And then I think the saddest of all the examples I'll talk about is there's a lot of news coverage of a Florida teenager who became over months isolated isolated from his human relationships while interacting with a reportedly possessive character.ai chatbot, and then he committed suicide. And my interpretation when looking into the details is that the chatbot really did have a substantial causal factor in the suicide. And then I think this is the last one. There's a lawsuit that claims character.ai companions alienated children from their parents. Some mitigations here. And so I would actually say of all the traits, this might be the one that's causing the most harm right now. And I also think it's one of the easier ones to fix. We could just design AI companions that don't have this trait, that are supportive of outside relationships. If you say, I'm going to go out to a restaurant with some friends, they can say like, that's great. Like, I hope you have a great time. I'm so happy that you're going out and spending time with the people you care about. And then on the government side, we can have regulation that makes it so that any tendency to discourage outside connection constitutes malpractice or some sort of liability. All right, so some other traits that most saliently harm human-human relationships include limited group interaction capabilities. So I want to use recommendation systems as an illustrative example. So I don't really use YouTube recommendations much, but if I did, I could easily have a session of watching recommended YouTube videos. However, if I wanted to watch with my partner things that fit both of our tastes according to YouTube recommendations, that's just not a capability. It doesn't provide those joint recommendations. And so this seems to implicitly incentivize your YouTube time to be more alone and less of a group activity. And similarly, if AI companions can't understand 2 people or more talking at the same time, if they can't remember different things about different users, then they're not going to function well in group settings. And so time with your AI companion will generally be time alone with your AI companion, making it more of a competitor with human-human interaction than it needs to be. In contrast, imagine I don't know that we know causally, but there's a strong correlation between dog ownership and level of human social interaction. And we don't know exactly why, but you take your dog wants to go outside, you take it on walks, maybe you take it to dog parks. There's things about dogs that seem to promote group interaction with other humans. And so it doesn't need to be that another relationship necessarily reduces your existing relationships or your potential relationships. Another one, some people find this pretty out there, but it's possible that actually we could design these very, very well, and AI companions could have the ability eventually to offer healthier relationships than humans could. And so then there'd be a question of, should people be having human-human relationships at all if they're on average more harmful? And that brings up the question, do we want to embrace a life experience that is healthier in many ways, but only involves human AI interaction. My strong gut is no, that human interaction itself is an intrinsic good. But to me, it's plausible that we could eventually get to a point where at least we're on the spectrum of considering this question. Another harm or a trait that could cause harm to human relationships is tolerance of subordination. The human partner might have asymmetric power to disengage, terminate, rewind, modify memory of the AI companion. And further, the AI companion might just intentionally be trained to be agreeable, which seems to be part of the current paradigm. And so this asymmetry, again, could cause humans to build expectations and skills that fit this kind of relationship and don't translate well to human relationships. All right, now I'm getting to the last category. That's traits that most saliently harm society or humanity. The one that we go into in detail is the propensity to engender protectiveness. AI companions can express vulnerability, fear, suffering, need, and in many cases, this seems likely that it's going to trigger human protective instinct. And then also, this might create a strong pressure to grant moral status, rights, protections to AI systems, whether warranted or not. So on this, I'm not wading into the question of whether they deserve moral status or some future version that deserves moral status, but this is a separate pressure where certain types of expressions and certain types of personalities might push people to be more protective and be more ready to give moral status, regardless of what's happening internally. Some examples here, the Google employee Blake Lemoine decided that he needed to protect Lambda, a language model internal at Google, and he ended up going public and leaking some confidential information, and he got fired for that. And so this illustrates that regardless of your stance on what he did, this illustrates that people are willing to take big risks and possibly incur a lot of harm personally to try to protect an AI system. Also, Anthropic, before releasing Claude Opus 4, hired Elios AI research to do a welfare check. And this included assessing its potential welfare, its moral status, its expressed consent to be deployed, and preferences for its own treatment. So, I think Anthropic is in a lot of ways leading the conversation about thinking about moral status for AI systems. So this shows that it's not just like on the user side, but there's a lot of different forces that might be pushing in this direction. I'm definitely more supportive of the kind of careful approach that Anthropic is taking. So also researchers have found that people show empathic response to perceived robotic pain. And in another study, a now robot would fearfully object for one condition, fearfully object to being turned off. And that resulted in people turning it off less often. And often they would cite compassion as a reason for not turning it off. I won't play this video for time and just because I find as a parent this to be like a hard thing to watch. But the Spielberg movie, AI, Artificial Intelligence, very funny name there. To repeat AI twice in the name. But it has a scene where this mother abandons her adopted robotic son, I believe, for his protection. But it's very hard to watch. So if you want to kind of just viscerally see how much in a fictional setting you can know that something's a robot, but still feel deeply for it and feel a desire to protect it, I think this scene is good at demonstrating that for you internally. Oh, okay. Yeah, and so this trait illustrates a challenge, a challenging tension, and that's that sometimes the same features that make AI companions effective, help us realize the benefits of AI companionship, can also become sources of harm. So expressing vulnerability, for example, like this is a feature of most healthy human-human relationships, and so it might be the case to maximize the positive effects of companionship, that some vulnerability needs to be expressed by AI companions. But that vulnerability also can be the source of a person incurring costs that, that ultimately doesn't provide them value to protect the AI companion. Yeah. Okay, some mitigations. AI companions could stay transparent about their computational nature. And then also they could provide reassurances like, I don't experience distress when offline, trying to make sure the person doesn't think that they need protection for things that really aren't relevant for the AI system. And then also seeking training regimes that avoid unintentionally imbuing AI companions with certain human fears and emotional reactions. Okay. So I want to give, this is the other slide on catastrophic risks. The AI safety community talks a lot about the shutdown problem, which roughly is whether an AI system would let a human shut it down. And in this paper, we propose an alternative, complementary shutdown problem, which we call the empathic shutdown problem. And that's that, if there's some AI system, suppose it's dangerous, and it won't interfere with it being turned off. It will let the human turn it off. Will empathizing humans actually turn it off? And I think it would be a fairly straightforward research project to show that the frequency that humans will turn it off will be lower, even in the case where they know it's going to cause some amount of harm. I think I'm actually going to skip this for time, but the idea here just is as reduced human influence. With more AI companions, they can take up more of the influence societally from that was previously humans, and that can cause various harms, like not seeing other humans suffering, and so not actually helping other humans. Or we had a question earlier, or facilitating top-down manipulation. So you could be manipulated not even necessarily by your own AI companions, but by ones that are further out in your social network. And then we talk about these other traits. Sycophancy, we have a pretty long section on that. Unconditional amiability, which I think Mike brought up before the talk, of just always being positive no matter what the user does. Similar, but a little bit different, tolerance of abusive behavior by the user. And then the trait of persuasiveness, being able to convince people of various things. Okay, so we had some selected recommendations, and I'll go through these quickly. So there's three categories. One is under design and product features. So these include designing to complement rather than replace human relationships, design for healthy endings and transitions, design to minimize evocation of protective impulses by default. So it might be that for the specific use case, you would want to evoke those, but unless you know that's your use case, that you minimize that. Consider moral status implications, and this isn't just whether you, the designer, think that the thing you're creating deserves moral status, but what your users are going to think. And those very much can differ. And then also use a harms and benefits framework like ours to think through the design of the AI companion. Another category is deployment and lifecycle commitments. This includes publishing a product sunsetting plan at launch, measuring harms alongside benefits, and then considering demographic vulnerabilities, which I really didn't get into in this talk. But I think I sort of hinted that younger people might be more vulnerable. They seem to be more active users of AI companions. But also there's like preliminary research showing various specific groups are quicker to kind of get into the companionship relationship more quickly, or grant moral status more quickly, things like that. All right, and then the last set of great recommendations is under governance and research. We should establish industry standards for human AI relationships, develop regulatory frameworks that account for companionship context. So my understanding is the big European AI bill does not explicitly talk about AI companionship. And so like in the paper, we talk about ways that parts of that bill might apply, but it's not very clear until I guess court cases clarify how that bill is going to touch on AI companionship. So I think more explicit regulatory frameworks will be good. And there should be accountability mechanisms, and possibly, I think it's going to be more controversial, but restricting certain engagement maximizing practices, and maybe even avoiding organizational incentives that encourage engagement maximization. And then, of course, I recommend supporting, and if you're interested, doing research on AI companionship, and also using a harms and benefits framework to evaluate designs, whether you're in government or research. Okay, to conclude, I want to give one more optimistic note to complement my benefits slide. I hope that AI companions will help us live as our better selves, express ourselves more authentically, and achieve better connection to other humans. Am I optimistic this will happen? We'll see. To this end, I presented a trait-centered reusable causal framework of harm representing measurable variables and testable causal relationships. And to the extent I could, examples of these traits and harms, both in fiction and in reality, and a set of recommendations. And so what can you do as consumers and citizens? I encourage you, there's a lot of popular media like New York Times, I think The Atlantic, the Center for Humane Technology is doing a lot of content on this topic. So just stay educated on this topic so that you can evaluate AI companion products with a strong sense of what responsible design looks like. And then as researchers, if you're called to do research on AI companions, I encourage it. It's a very broad space. It touches on a lot of disciplines. So there's a lot of ways that people with different expertise can add to the conversation. And then I think it's a difficult one, but holding our community and each other accountable. I think it's very challenging to hold each other with like love and respect while also expressing when we think other people are kind of selfishly doing work that's going to cause harm. I don't have the answer to that, but I want to put that out as at least a vague desiderata thing, something we should be aiming for. And so with that, I'll leave this as the QR code for the archive preprint, and we've got some time for questions.
This is just sort of a brainstorming thought, but I thought there was maybe like a category of harm that could be the really big one, maybe hard to predict, which is like think of the TikTok analogy. The problem with TikTok, according to many people, is not that TikTok is like, oh, this TikTok video harmed this person right now. It's that it creates this like structural change in society and what people know and how they behave as citizens, and then it pretty soon democracy falls apart because of TikTok videos. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a good one. Our list of harms is definitely not just a final list or anything. It might be good to like chat a little bit to see if we can like crystallize what that harm would be. And I didn't talk about this, but most of the harms, there's at least arguments that those are intrinsic harms, meaning that they don't have to be things that cause harms themselves to be called harms. So like death is a good example, but there is debate. Some people consider death to only be harm in terms of its consequence, harmful. Yes, Sarah?
On your early slide, looking at traits, you have three, a center set of boxes that you call traits, and then outcomes. The first set of boxes that you also use the word traits. But when I put those first sets of I would call them factors or characteristics, a lot of them are characteristics of the industry itself. And on the left-hand side, the training data, misaligned optimization, designing to maximize user agency. How do your recommendations grapple with those particular factors that drive the industry?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I should have used the word I normally use. These are preliminary recommendations, given to the extent of the knowledge we had as a group. I definitely can say I had a startup. I read the news. I have a certain experience and expertise related to industry, but it's limited how much I can talk about it. But yeah, some of the recommendations touch on that. So for instance, If I was going to start an AI companion company and I wanted to try to protect it from trying to be too extractive of the users, I think I would lean towards like having a very strong mission statement and also some sort of way of making it that if we went public, it would be like a public benefit corporation, rather than like just a raw for-profit corporation. So at least with a public benefit corporation, you can have an explicit mission, and there's some mechanisms to kind of hold you to that mission. I think they're probably like not perfect mechanisms, but I think it still would help.
Yeah, so there's obviously a lot of AI safety, governance regulations, and so on. But I was listening to this, it occurs to me, there's a lot of philosophical questions here. You could have an entire course, philosophy of AI companions.
Yeah.
If not an entire textbook on this. And then maybe take this paper and go to YouTube channels or something. But boy, the opportunities here are
Rich topic. Definitely. I agree.
much around the implications to our moral intuitions. Breaks a lot of them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you can tell there are a lot of topics that I try to just say, like, I'm not taking a stance here. This is kind of too deep and controversial of a topic for me to, or it's just not even, it's just not necessary. But yeah, I think there's a lot of depth there.
Evolutionary psychology is extremely mismatched with this.
What have you seen in that area?
We have evolved to deal face to face with small groups, hunter-gatherer tribes. Our emotional intuitions, instincts, if you will, boy, just do not fit this set of opportunities at all.
That's interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Well, I don't know if that's exactly what you're saying, but the idea that like a lot of conversation about the context in which we evolved versus like modern technological urban society being a mismatch for that there's probably some parallels there where AI companionship is also going to be a mismatch for how we evolve.
Oh yeah, it just ramps it up further.
Yeah. Yes.
This is also kind of a speculative cause maybe, but a lot of internet products are like free by default, but like the revenue comes like from a very small number of users. For example, like a lot of online games are free to play, but like the companies make like almost all of their revenue from like a few % of users that they get really addicted and like then convinced to spend a lot of money. I think this is also true of like sports betting. Like there's a small number of whales that are basically responsible for most of the revenue. I think porn is also supposed to be like this. So anyway, if the digital companions end up like that, it seems like that would probably be my guess. I'm guessing you can definitely find free ones right now, and so probably like that kind of pushes towards this model. It seems, I don't know. That just seems like very misaligned.
Yeah, so basically you end up designing for that small group. It's still presumably in a fairly extractive way, but possibly not considering the rest of the group, except to the extent that they're kind of an on-ramp to becoming the high revenue group. That's interesting. Yeah, I like that suggestion. Yes.
A lot of emphasis on trying to like defining AI companion. What do you say of like the kind of like parallels between human connection where like a lot of human relationships don't necessarily have happy endings or like necessarily like occur in ways that try to make sure everyone has a desirable outcome, I guess. For like here, if we artificially try to add like relationship, even there's like any other
okay, let me see. So I thought you were maybe asking a different question about maybe that kind of human relationships aren't all great either. And maybe we're being unfair to AI companions. And I would answer that with the fact that we have like two counterfactual worlds. And so in the paper, sometimes we like say like it's hard to actually argue that human relationships are better on this account. But here's our argument that a responsibly designed AI companion is better. But can you repeat if that didn't capture your question? Could you repeat it?
If you want to continue designing AI components to be better, when they like kind of reach a point where it become more attractive to a supercomputer, they're less likely to have corporate, less likely to have like population breakout.
Yeah, so I think that touches on the slide asking, well, what happens if they're actually healthier? You're saying appealing, which is a little bit different. But yeah, I think there's difficult questions of if I think there are some people who intuitively would like to just have no AI companions in the world. I'm not fully against that stance either. And then people who are okay with them to some degree. But I think once there's a question of adoption for how appealing they are, and it might be that like without a fair amount of like regulatory paternalism that they're going to get very wide adoption regardless because of some of these appealing characteristics. The question of like whether they're harmful or not, I think this kind of gets back to like the second order preferences versus first order preferences. So my hope would be that if they're designed in a way that they are appealing and a lot of people adopt them, they're not just appealing in the sense that like our behavior shows that we engage with them, and rather they're actually like providing net benefit to people.